So there seems to be this inside joke in the Sailor Moon community about how useless Tuxedo Mask is. Like, he pretty much does nothing. In turn, there's a debate that, no, that's not true, he does have a purpose. Personally, I think it's a mix of both. And I also think that was incredibly intentional. I've been thinking about this for a while, so I am going to be a bit all over the place, but I did write a script in hopes it comes out sounding as much sense as possible. Also, FYI, this is going to be focusing on the 90s anime because as of recording this video, that's pretty much where all my Sailor Moon knowledge comes from. So, Tuxedo Mask is Mamoru Chiba, Sailor Moon, or Usagi Tsukino's love interest. The story of Mamoru begins in the Silver Millennium, a golden age of sorts, where the Moon Kingdom and the Earth Kingdom lived in harmony. Princess Sarandi, Usagi's past life, was the princess of the Moon Kingdom. Prince Endymion, Mamoru's past life, was prince of the Earth Kingdom. At some point, the two had fallen in love, but unfortunately soon after, the Earth and Moon Kingdom would go to war, as an evil sorceress named Queen Beryl had brainwashed the entire Earth Kingdom in order to attack the Moon Kingdom. Prince Endymion died trying to protect Princess Sarandi, and she, too, met her fate. Even though I kept the more detailed parts brief, it still remains a very average tragic love story. Now we get to present day as in 90s Japan. So, one fateful day, Usagi Tsukino and Mamoru Chiba meet. They're both very annoyed with each other. Mamoru seems to have a very standard bad boy type of personality. He makes fun of Usagi, who, to him, is a random 13-year-old he keeps running into. Usagi, in turn, is annoyed by him, who, to her, is a random 17 to 18-year-old who makes fun of her every chance he gets. Also, FYI, in pretty much every other iteration, Usagi is 14 and Mamoru is 16. It's a really big and questionable age gap in the 90s anime, but for the sake of this video, we'll call it a product of its time and move on. So, around the same time Usagi meets this man, she becomes Sailor Moon and is saved by Tuxedo Mask. She has zero clue who this man is, except that he randomly comes in to help her during battles. And for the most part, that means throwing a rose and then offering emotional support of some kind, such as saying, "You can do it, Sailor Moon." Again, he does help her fight often, and he does protect her, but the baseline of his character is just a supporting role / love interest. So, his introduction does serve to show us that he's a white knight trope. You know, the person who's there to protect and save their obvious love interest. In this case, the love interest is Usagi Tsukino, or Sailor Moon. So we're going to take a quick break from explaining the Sailor Moon plot to examine why giving Sailor Moon a white knight in of itself could be seen as a bad idea. Because I think it's important to understand why it's a bad idea, to see why the trope being altered would be necessary. So, for starters, Naoko Takeuchi wrote Sailor Moon with the intent of it being about girls being powerful, girls being strong, girls being able to take down any villain, you know? And that's what Sailor Moon and the Sailor Senshi are supposed to represent. They're supposed to be girls who are powerful and strong and can take down any villain. So if that's the case, having a white knight come in to save them would defeat that purpose. Because if they're saved by a man every single time, they're not really any of those things to the extent that they are supposed to be. So if they shouldn't have a white knight come in to save them, why is Mamoru Chiba or Tuxedo Mask present? Well, Sailor Moon was also written with a dual purpose of being a love story between Sailor Moon and Tuxedo Mask, so he was going to be there anyway, no matter what. I also think that as a presence, he aided Sailor Moon in her earlier days before she really had any grounding on what she was doing. When Usagi transformed into Sailor Moon, she didn't really know why she was fighting evil. She only knew there was a princess who needed protecting, unknown to her that she was the princess in question. So he did this while Sailor Moon was collecting the 4 inner senshi: Sailor Mercury, Sailor Mars, Sailor Jupiter, and Sailor Venus. The senshi essentially do what Tuxedo Mask is doing, but it's been their job to do that since before Sarandi and Endymion ever met, so they're just better at it, I guess? Anyways, in this time frame, Mamoru has 2 different love interests. Tuxedo Mask is obviously the love interest of Sailor Moon, yet as Mamoru Chiba, he begins dating Rei Hino, aka Sailor Mars. This ends up playing zero purpose in the story, as the little that it adds has so little relevance to the plot, it could have been completely cut out and not matter in the slightest. Anyways, that happened. Moving on. So, for the latter half of Season 1, Tuxedo Mask gets kidnapped and brainwashed by Queen Beryl, making him act as her minion, Prince Endymion. Sailor Moon, now possessing her memories from her past life, is incredibly fucking upset by this because, oh my god, that's basically the equivalent of my soulmate getting kidnapped and then kidnapping other people and attacking me and my friends. So at this point, Tuxedo Mask is no longer coming to the rescue, but actively being what they need rescuing from. This was the start of the White Knight trope being completely flipped on its head, but later on in the season where Usagi, who is the embodiment of the damsel in distress trope, ends up being left alone after all the Senshi die trying to protect her, saves Mamoru from the brainwashing. At this point, he too dies protecting her. After that, she defeats Queen Beryl, technically all alone, but with the spirits of the dead in her Senshi. Now, I could go on to explain Season 2, Season 3, and Season 4, but I personally don't want to bring up irrelevant information to my point, so we'll be skipping to Season 5. So, Season 5 has two particularly interesting things for me to note. The first is how at the start of the season, the White Knight trope isn't flipped on its own head, rather, Mamoru and Usagi switch roles. At the start of the season, Mamoru gets a glass shard in his eye. The glass shard puts a curse on him to make him really obsessed with mirrors, and particularly obsessed with looking into them. This gets him trapped by Queen Beryl, and Usagi ends up needing to save him. This small start to Season 5 is personally one of my favorite parts of the season and series in general, but that's just my opinion, you know? Next up, Mamoru has an opportunity to study in America, and though it means he'll be gone for, I believe it was about a year, Usagi still chose to support him and encourage him to go. While he's at the airport, he proposes to Usagi. In case you are wondering how his trip to America was, he never makes it, as his starseed gets stolen on the plane ride and he pretty much dies. I haven't finished the season as of recording this, so please forgive me if I'm spouting off nonsense. But my understanding from what I've looked up online is that Sailor Galaxia was the one who killed him, and she's taken over the entire universe besides Earth and its solar system. So naturally, that's next on her list. She spends the rest of the season killing off everyone except for Usagi, who ends up defeating her at the end, reviving everyone, including Mamoru. I think Mamoru dying at the start and in no way being capable of protecting her, or even there as emotional support, acted as the best way to show off how much Usagi has grown since the first season. And that's something that wouldn't have been possible to show off if Tuxedo Mask existed as a White Knight. And I'd even say it wouldn't have been possible without her having a White Knight in him. When she started everything off, she had support through him, and even then a lot of people doubted her and her ability to grow into who she needed to be. So to have that support taken away, and her to stand on her own 2 feet, and do something like, I don't know, saving the entire universe, really did show off who she has become. And I just think that was a perfect use of the White Knight trope to advance the story being told. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like or dislike, whichever you fancy. Subscribe if you want to see more, and with that, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.